Good day to you, and welcome to a quick kin stretch class, a little kin chunk, just focused on getting your hips moving. Especially I'm thinking after a day of a lot of sitting or not moving, or maybe before you're heading out to move. This little class should work really nicely as a warm-up for your whole lower body, but in particular your hips. In terms of props and whatnot, you'll maybe want to block a little later on, but the main key is that you just have some nice open floor space that you can get down on and move and stretch out and feel great. All right, so let's go ahead and start things up with a little motion for your spine. We'll come into quadruped for some cat-cow spinal segmentation. So settle into that position of your body that feels evenly distributed through your hands and your feet. And then once you think you're there, stiffen your body up so you have a little tension, and then we'll start moving from the tailbone. In general, I like to try to go a little slower than my body wants to at first, especially as I'm coming off of some inactivity, because there's sort of this tendency to just kind of rush on through. So really go nice and slow. Give your brain a chance to really notice what's going on. And we'll take that for another run. See if you can put a little bit more pressure into your feet and your hands. Enliven a little bit more contraction through the front of your body as you move into flexion. And then start looking for that contraction on the back of your body as you move into extension. Okay, finish up that second rep, and as you do, you can come down to the ground and get into a nice side lying position. Go ahead, throw that block under your head, or I'm just going to use my arm here. And we're going to just start with another car, this for your hip. And the idea here at first is just to get a feel for kind of what's on the ground, what's happening, okay? So drive that heel back behind you, feel into what contracts on the back side of your leg, and then smoothly bring that leg up to the sky, smoothly arcing forward, and then all the way around. And then as we go the other way, start tuning into what muscles are responsible for pulling you into each of these positions. Really trying to feel that out. Okay. We're going to explore that a bit more. On this second rep though, bring your top hand onto your torso so you can just feel if your back is trying to get involved, and we want to not let it get involved. So if you feel it move, just pause, bring it back to position, and then continue on with your hip car. Breathing even as your muscles are working. Easy to forget. Okay. And then we're gonna, as you wrap up that second rep, we're gonna just explore a little bit of what we call zones of the hip car. So one of those zones is the zone of adduction, which is the position of your leg moving, in this case, down towards the ground. So start another car, but we're just gonna scan back and forth through that zone. Basically trying to get your leg as close to the ground as you can without the rest of your body moving. Meaning you could just flop the leg down, but we're not going to let that pelvis move. We're going to see how far the leg can move on its own, and then just scan through that zone. Treat this as a little warm-up for those inner thigh muscles if you can feel them. Okay. And then let's start moving into the second zone, which is that zone of extension back behind you. So we're going to start scanning basically as high as you can reach it up without the leg coming forward, and then we will reverse back. We're just exploring all the muscles that pull that leg back behind. So this, you'll feel this in your hamstrings, but also in your glutes. And you're just trying to bring as many of those muscle sensations to the party as you can in those regions. Okay, and then we're going to keep going now into the next zone, which is abduction, out to the side. And that sort of starts where extension ended. We're going to come forward until you feel like that knee is really heading up towards your armpit, and then you can reverse it back. Try to get that leg behind you while it's still lifted. Probably feeling some heat in your hip and maybe in the rest of your body. Okay. And then for this final zone, you're going to want to straighten out your bottom leg so you have some room here so that we can work this whole zone of flexion where the leg starts maybe on the ground or near the ground, moves across to where we ended with our abduction. So brace again, bring that knee up towards your chest, up towards the sky, and then when you feel like you're starting to twist that thigh to head back, that can be our stop sign for now. Again, just trying to get a feel for what muscles are pulling your leg into position here. And if you can turn those muscles up a little bit as you go slow, give your body time to feel. Excellent. Okay, let that go. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So just flip your body. Laying down, feeling the ground kind of support you. Okay? And then starting with bent knees, let's just get a couple reps in nice and easy on this side. Maybe noticing how it's different than that first leg. Moving that leg behind and up, around. And then when your knees touch, you can go back the other way. Remember, this is kind of a quicker run through. Could we do cars slower? For sure. But we want to also just get moving. So let this be a low or medium intensity. You're not going to win anything by doing a perfect car, but there is the risk of kind of running out of steam or getting bored. So we want to just keep it moving as we're warming up. Okay. All right, take your time, get in a couple of those reps. And then let's settle in for a little more intensity to examine these zones. Dig in a little bit more, zone in, if you will. So from here, I'm going to start exploring that zone of adduction, where my leg's coming down towards the ground. And, one thing I'm thinking as I'm doing these is that these zones are they're not strict zones. They really definitely overlap with each other. So if you're feeling that, that's totally cool and fine. But for now, you're trying to focus in on all the tissues in your inner thigh that are responsible for bringing that femur bone down towards the ground. Can you feel those with just a little bit more clarity? Okay, and now let's move into that extension zone, starting when your leg is really moving behind your pelvis and then scanning all the way up. And before the leg starts to rotate and come forward, we're going to just circle back and focus in on that extension zone. Yes, there's some adduction towards the floor. Yes, there's some abduction towards the sky. But in between is what we're really focusing on here. Okay, and now let's shift to abduction. So starting where extension left off, start to sweep forward and back. And I'm basically pausing on my way forward when I feel like I've maxed out that rotation of my thigh. And then I'm just going to head on back. Could we pick a little different angle? Totally. We just want to use that familiarity that we're building to help the nervous system lock into the contractions and the muscles that we're actually trying to talk to here. There we go. Okay, and then for flexion, straighten out that bottom leg. Just set that leg across in front of you. And I like to start here because sometimes people can not feel that connection between flexion and adduction. So take a moment to really feel what muscles turn on when you try to make your leg heavy. And then can you hand that contraction off to the muscles more on the front of the hip, side of the hip, and before you start to rotate, then we're going to cut on back and just scan through here. Trying to turn things up just enough that you can encourage muscles to turn on that might not be so awake yet. All right, and let that go. Okay, so now to get into this quick hip series, we're going to work on some 90-90. Okay, we're going to mostly work from there today. So get into a 90-90 position, and just for clarity, how about you get into it with your right leg back, left leg forward. Once you're there, I want you to just start a little bit of a wiggle at your pelvis. So my hands on my hip, just sort of feel, oh, I can move there even while my shins stay still. Okay. Just feeling into that. No real work yet. Just feeling what motion is freely available. Okay, and leaning off to the side as much as feels comfortable on your back. And then as you get a sense of this, go ahead and turn your pelvis like you're trying to turn your belt buckle back towards that back leg as much as you can. Okay? And you'll feel a point where either your knee tells you to stop, maybe your hip tells you to stop, but you'll get some sort of stop sign. It might be a bit further than me, but whatever your stop sign is, that's where we want to pause. And then from here, let's turn on some activity. The activity you're looking for are muscles that work to, they would lift your ankle in this position. So your ankle probably won't lift, but try to ask it to get lighter, and you should feel some muscles turn on. And then in addition to that, try to actively turn your body more towards this back leg. Okay? So you're using that musculature, using that cue to actually pull yourself just that little percentage further back into internal rotation on this back leg. Okay, get a feel for that. Try to remember that. And then switch your intent. Make your back leg heavy here, almost like you're trying to push something back behind you or push the floor back behind you, and use that to start turning your pelvis forward. As far as it'll go, when you get that stop sign, pause, and then try to turn on those same muscles we were finding before that will pull you back into that internally rotated position as far as you can go. When you can't go any further, pause and make the leg heavy. Try to push the floor behind you as you turn your pelvis back forward. Okay, keep working on this, trying to pull yourself into the position using these muscles on the outside of your hip, and then notice what turns on the inside or the underside of your hip to help drive you forward. And last one here. Pulling yourself even a little bit further than the first rep, and then pushing with a little bit more intensity than that first rep. Okay. Once you're facing square ahead, just pause there and see if it's a possibility to get your left elbow and left forearm in line with your left shin. And then lean into it so you're really gonna connect that leg to the ground. Now if putting the knee all the way on the floor doesn't feel good, you might slip that yoga block underneath your knee and then be in the same position, okay? But from this strong base position, now we can work on another kind of similar capacity of the hip, which is lifting of the knee, okay? Now as you start to lift your knee, because your front leg is locked, you'll run into a stop sign where you cannot go further. Maybe because of a stretch, but more likely because of a contraction in this back area that just won't contract anymore. That's what we're after. Okay, set it down. On this next one, find that stop sign and then see how much you're able to actually turn your belly button, which will start stretching that front leg as well. Okay, and then back down. So each time I'm trying to lift just the leg first, and then I'm combining that with a turn of my whole pelvis. Couple more here. each time trying to actively stretch yourself. So this is that awesome gray zone that KinStretch provides us with, which is, are we working and actively contracting? Yes. Are we stretching and lengthening tissue? Yes. We're doing that at the same time. So your brain is really getting on board with this long stretched position, and you're not just passively stretching there. Okay. Now on this next one, try to find that same stretch, and then we're going to actually continue rotating all the way the other way. I might need to give myself some space. Okay, so I'm going to lift up that back knee high as I can. Then I'm going to continue lifting the knee by turning the pelvis. And then when I can't turn anymore, I'm going to lose this front arm. I'm going to put both arms on the ground behind me so that I can keep turning, keeping those knees as far apart as possible from each other. Going slow, as if you could pause on a dime at any of these positions and really feel what muscles are working for you here. All the way around until now you are facing towards what was your back leg, now is your front leg. Okay? And just settle in here. Again, hand on pelvis, getting a sense of sort of what is available freely, free movement wise. Okay, getting a feel for that. And then on your next trip back, turning towards that back leg and getting a feel for, okay, what is kind of stopping me from going further? Sometimes it can be hard to put words to that, but I do want you to try to feel into what's keeping you from moving further. Okay? And then from here, take a moment to ask your ankle to get light as if you're going to twist your thigh, and that will help you turn on some muscles on the side of your hip. If you don't feel much now, that's okay. This is where we're trying to build contraction. Okay, so you're using that to pull yourself more back towards that left leg. All right, and then staying here, make that back leg heavy instead, as if you're trying to push the mat or the floor behind you. Slowly use that strength to turn your pelvis forward. And then when you can't go any further, switch to trying to pull yourself back. So we're essentially using the musculature on the outside of your hip to pull yourself into an end range position. And then we're using the stretched musculature in the underside of the hip here to push you out of that position. This is an awesome way to train the full range of motion of a joint. Using the shortening stuff to pull you in. That would be the regressive tissue if you're getting deeper into your KinStretch verbiage. And then I'm going to use the progressive tissue, the stretching tissue here, to push myself out. A couple more here. Really try to turn up the intensity of those contractions. Your brain will really appreciate that in terms of opening up ranges of motion. Last one. Pulling yourself back, then pushing yourself forward. Nice. Okay. Now, just like before, we're going to anchor up on that front leg, elbow on knee, forearm on shin. If that doesn't work for you, you could potentially use your other hand and pin it to the ground. It will limit your twist a little bit, but that's okay. The main thing is we want this front leg to feel anchored to the ground, okay? So try to get that connection to the floor. And then from here, start feeling what muscles are turning on to just lift your knee. Kind of feel into how high you can lift that knee. And then see that you can continue lifting that knee by actually twisting and putting some stretch into this other leg. Okay? And then back down. Now as I set down, I'm not actually resting in between because I'm trying to build up some heat and some intensity on the outside of the hip. Totally fine if you want to take a quick rest, no problem. But just realize you have that variable to control. How long are you asking this tissue to be under tension? The longer it's under tension, the more of a signal you're sending it in terms of working, getting more efficient, and eventually getting stronger. Okay, on this next rep, we're going to keep going. So get ready to move those hands behind you into a 90-90 switch. So I'm going to lift that knee, maybe cramping a little bit on the side of the hip. Lift that knee further, and then try to stay smooth here. Keep that knee moving as you start finding what muscles actually get your knees to stay apart as you move through to a 90-90 straddle position. Okay, so here your knees are bent to 90 degrees, but you're sort of straddling your legs out wide. Sometimes we call this the honey bear or the bear sit. Okay, and we're going to just hang here for a second. So option one is what you're seeing here, where my hands are on my shins. I'm using my elbows to just pry my knees apart. Really feeling into that stretch. Now, if this feels like a lot of work or your back really has to round here, that's totally normal and fine. You might just choose to lean back against the wall a little bit and then use your hands a little bit more on the knees to stretch out. Okay? Whatever position works best for you, I want you to find that. And then we're just going to actually passively stretch here for a moment. So find a stretch for your inner thighs. And then big inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. Okay, really keep emphasizing that long exhale to try to ask your body to just relax any tension that it might be feeling. This is can be a really stretchy position, especially if you've been sitting all day. This can feel like really good, but also really like extreme. So use your breath to just kind of hang out there and chill out there. You can move your neck around. You can feel some contractions on the outside of your hips. Okay, exploring your own sensations is a huge part of kin stretch, but that can feel a little daunting at first when you're kind of just trying to follow along. So if you take this class on multiple retakes, I really encourage you to play with that little bit of variability, that little bit of intuition about what kind of stretch your body might want, and you'll be surprised about how much you can actually learn just from that little bit of probing. Okay. Now, from here, actually, we're going to just lay down on the ground, but I want you to try to keep one leg somewhat in this position. It's okay if you get out of it and get back in, but basically I want you to feel here that when we're laying down, this leg is externally rotated. Okay, it's rotated outwards. I would be more in an internally rotated position if I looked like this. Okay, so just starting to get a feel for that. All right, because we're basically going to now train some hip external rotation. So from laying down, you're in this position, go ahead and pin your arms to the ground nice and strong. So this feels like an upper body activity as well. And then use that brace to slowly lift your ankle off the ground and see how high you can get that ankle without moving your knee. Okay, so you're just really twisting the thigh. And then keep that rotation. Keep that ankle trying to twist towards you as you bring that leg up and across your body. Okay? Now, as you cut across, we're starting to look for those inner thigh muscles that should really help you pull your leg across and then set your leg down on the ground. Okay? Now, for some of you, setting the foot on the ground just is like, my leg has to go way down here to do that. If that's you, then that's where I would want you to use your yoga block right underneath your foot so that the ground kind of comes up towards your foot. Okay? Because once we're there, we can camp out for a second and feel into some of those inner thighs, especially if you use your hand on that inner thigh or inner knee to cue it. Just give yourself some resistance and you'll be able to find a contraction in your inner thigh. And then you want to use that to slowly lighten the foot and start cutting back across, bringing that leg as close to you as you can while holding on to that external rotation. And then I'm going out to the side, keeping that rotation, and maybe having to drop the leg down a little bit to hit the floor. Okay? So I'm going to keep going back and forth here, just a few more reps, trying to feel more inner thigh, feel more front of hip, feel more side of hip as I pull that leg out to the side. And we're basically doing one part of a hip car. If you're asking yourself, are we kind of doing a hip car here, Will? Yes, we totally are. Okay, one more trip. Really trying to turn up to the intensity that your body is ready for and asking for today. Okay, now once that foot gets to the ground, melt away the tension and switch your legs. If you were using a block, go ahead and grab that for our other side. And, in fact, let's actually start on the other side, kind of cut across your body. Now, when you first cut across your body, your body will go, oh, I can easily do that by rolling over, but we don't want to roll over. So you want to try to actively pull just the leg across and see where it can get to the ground. Again, if you'd like to use the block to bring the ground up to you, it might actually give you access to a little bit more inner thigh. All right, let's do our first kind of feel out rep. So we're going to find those inner thigh muscles, bring that leg up toward you, and then keep that externally rotated position in the hip as you send the leg out to the side and down to the ground, doing your best to not let your pelvis or your other leg or your torso move. Lift it up. Keep cutting that leg across. I always joke, try to bite your ankle. That's how much you want to think external rotation as you cut across. Couple more. Building the intensity, because that contraction is really that's the language or the currency of your tissues. So you really want to play with that, be on control of that. Okay, and final rep here. Can you get more inner thigh contraction? Can you keep that as you start lifting the foot? All right, and then set it down. Okay, now final thing here that I'd like to do is just get a little quick hip car input. I'm going to go back to what was not the leg that I was just using, and the real kind of opportunity here is to feel how some activity and some light stretching changes your experience of what's available. Okay, so we're just going to do one. Start driving that leg back, but remember about adduction. Remember about bringing that leg towards the ground. Maybe that feels a little bit more clear to you now. And then remember about extension, feeling into what muscles are contracting to actually pull your leg behind you, and then handing off to those muscles on the side of your hip, and then to the front of your hip. And if your other leg gets in the way, you can kind of move it to see, can you get that inner thigh back involved? And we'll go the other way. Okay, nice. Anything you noticed? Anything you want to share? I always love to hear how the retest car feels. Okay, let's try this other leg. Settling in, finding some bracing so you're not going to move your spine. We're going to start reaching thigh and knee and shin towards the floor. And then behind you, up to the sky, toward your armpit, and all the way across. Maybe feeling into that inner thigh again, trying to get your leg to the floor. And back up, out to the side. and behind you. Alrighty, very nice work. I hope that felt good. I also hope it felt like you touched some intensity, you got pushed into some edges. And at this point, I wish you the best for the rest of your day, maybe off to some activity, or maybe dive into a little bit more intense kin stretch class, or maybe none of those things, and you're just gonna keep moving. All right, whatever that is, wish you well. Take care.